This is a real issue, and we are not going to solve the increase in hate in general, and in particular, the increase in hate crimes against Jewish New Yorkers and Jewish Brooklynites. And we can't just ignore it and act like it's not happening, because it is. And that is why we're going to take a series of steps. This is one of many steps that we're going to take to meet this head on. This fight must be met with a head-on mindset of addressing this problem. Brooklyn is a garden of diversity, and the weeds of hate, they have infiltrated this garden, and we can't just prune it away. We have to go to the core and to the seed where it lies to ensure that it won't continue to grow and continue to destroy and choke away all of the healthy flowers of diversity that we have in this borough. 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home. We have one of the largest Jewish populations outside of Israel. We consider ourselves to be the Tel Aviv of America, and if we can't deal with hate crime of Jewish constituents here in Brooklyn, then it's not going to be dealt correctly throughout this entire country. It starts here, it ends here, and how we handle it here will send the right message throughout the entire country. 52% of the crimes of hate crimes were targeted against Jews. 52% were targeted against Jews. And when you look at the numbers, they speak for themselves. When you look at an audit of anti-Semitic incidents studied in 2017, it revealed that there was more than 200 reported anti-Semitic incidents in New York City. This is a 90% jump from 2016. From 2017 to 2016, there was a 90% jump in incidents. In 2018, 13 out of the 17 reported anti-Semitic assaults happened in Brooklyn. 13 out of the 17. This is becoming ground zero because of our Jewish population in this borough. People who prey on Jewish constituents have decided to come to the place where they pray. In Borough Park, Crown Heights, Williamsburg, we see some of the actions that are caught on videotapes of breaking windows, striking individuals, throwing rocks and stones. We're just seeing a repeated increase on this incident. And this is against the backdrop of what the ADL is ramping up and doing, as will be talked about a little later. But they have been the modern day Paul Revere of telling us that this hatred is coming, and for the most part, many in and out of government have ignored the cries that we have been hearing in the synagogues and in our communities throughout this entire city, and that is why we want to ramp up our actions to state that it will not continue to happen. I'm calling an emergency meeting with my superintendents here in Brooklyn, Brooklyn North and Brooklyn South, part of the Department of Education and our charter schools, because we want to go into our schools and teach our students the conversation around diversity, around bullying, around the anti-Semitic actions, around the actions around attacks against LGBTQ communities, attacks against our Muslim communities, of the young women who wear hijabs that are attacked and assaulted, attacks against other students because of everything from homelessness. There has been such an increase in hatred and attacks, and I believe that the Jewish communities in the areas of Williamsburg and Greenpoint and in Crown Heights because of their religious garb, they are able to be pointed out, as we see Rabbi Eli Cohen, and they are targeted because they become a symbol of the Jewish community here in the borough of Brooklyn, and they're easily identifiable, and people with hate in their heart are specifically targeting this population because it's almost they know that here is a person of Jewish faith, and they are using their hatred towards this particular group. Brooklyn happens to have the large number of members from the Hasidic community, and they are being targeted repeatedly. And we say that must stop, and we're going to do all that we have to do to stop that. The uptick in hate crimes in this borough is a blemish on this entire city and this entire country, and it's a blemish that we're not going to live with. And I'm saying to the men and women of the police department, we cannot ignore the crimes. We have to report them the way they are. If it's a hate crime, we have to report it. We can't sugarcoat it. We can't try to downgrade it. We have an excellent bureau within the police department, the Hate Crime Bureau, and I'm going to state that the only way we could properly identify and correct this is to properly classify it. I know there's a tendency to want the numbers not to be as high as they're supposed to be, but we cannot live in a cosmetic universe that we are living in a unified fashion. We must report them the way they are and then devise effective solutions to correct them. And so my hope today to partner with the ADL and other organizations to come up with a clear direction of educating our children to understand the power of tolerance and how we live together. We must stop the increase in hate crimes in general, and specifically the increase among the Jewish people of this city. And we can't remain silent. We have been too silent around these issues, and we've all seen them. We've all have witnessed the attacks. We've all witnessed the breaking of windows in synagogues. We have all witnessed the writing of swastikas, the comments, the anti-Jewish comments on the subway stations, on buildings, on cars, on vehicles. We've all witnessed this, and we cannot remain silent. We saw what silence has done in the past. We cannot allow a repeat of that in the future, specifically here in Brooklyn and also in New York City. New York City must have a zero tolerance for hate, and that's why we're here today. And so, again, I want to thank all of our religious leaders and elected officials that are here today to talk about this issue. And I want to turn it over to our partner in this pursuit, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the ADL. Jonathan?
There is no single place in America with a richer Jewish culture than Brooklyn. That culture stretches back far in time. The first Jew to settle in Brooklyn purchased land here in the mid-17th century. It's a culture that nurtures greatness. Sandy Koufax, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, even Larry David are among some of the notable Jews who grew up right here in Brooklyn. And it's a culture that leaves its mark on all of America. You can have a nosh at a Brooklyn deli in Spokane, Washington, or Birmingham, Alabama, as well as you can do it right here in Brooklyn. And part of what makes Brooklyn so special is that it boasts a Jewish population of 600,000. And that 600,000 person strong community is incredibly diverse. It includes the world's largest concentration of Syrian Jews. It includes hipsters, and it includes Hasids. And that vibrancy has flourished here because Brooklyn has been so welcoming. It has one of the most diverse populations of any borough, and I would argue any city in the world. That's why it's so troubling to see this borough plagued by this growing scourge of anti-Semitism. As Eric said, in 2017, there were over 200 reported anti-Semitic incidents here in New York City. But this represented a 90% spike. And in 2018, again, as the borough president said, 13 out of 17 anti-Semitic assaults that took place in the city happened right here in Brooklyn. And at ADL, we track these incidents. We track acts of harassment and vandalism and violence. And what's so alarming is that the situation has not improved this year. In fact, the severity of the incidents seems to be increasing in terms of their frequency, their aggressiveness, and their physicality. This year to date, there have been 111 confirmed incidents in Brooklyn alone, and another reported 6 just over the past week and a half. I mean, this is deeply alarming. Now, let's acknowledge that the Jewish community isn't the only minority that is affected by crime in Brooklyn. And violent acts take place every day where African Americans and Caribbean Americans and other groups suffer. These also demand our attention. We should not overlook this ongoing crisis. But the dramatic surge of attacks on the Jewish community really has no precedent. And I believe this is an issue that hasn't gotten enough national press attention. Maybe that's because it doesn't sort of fit neatly into a partisan narrative. Maybe that's because it isn't about the bias of one side of the political spectrum or the other. But what we are seeing are Jewish people and Jewish institutions being targeted and attacked simply because they are Jewish. And that is an outrage. ADL has called on law enforcement and elected officials to address this issue. We've offered rewards of up to $10,000 for information leading to arrests and convictions of those who've committed these anti-Semitic hate crimes in Brooklyn. And we work actively with the NYPD whenever and however possible. But to stop hate, we can't just arrest our way out of the problem. We have got to change hearts and minds. And that's why we believe it is so important to focus on children so we can inoculate the next generation from intolerance, so we can immunize them against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. That's why I'm proud to be announcing today that in partnership with the Brooklyn Borough President, who, as I said, has been an ally for so long in the fight against anti-Semitism, and the New York City Department of Education, ADL will be doubling the number of Brooklyn schools involved in our groundbreaking No Place for Hate program. No Place for Hate, which has helped to promote tolerance in over 1,700 public and private schools nationwide in the past 20 years. It enables a school to incorporate ADL's anti-bias and anti-bullying resources within their existing curricular program. No Place for Hate is unique because it is largely student-driven. The program asks student-led groups to identify bias and bullying issues in their school, to develop measurable goals to address those issues, and to coordinate and oversee the implementation of anti-bias and diversity activities throughout the year. No Place for Hate has already made a difference here. During the prior school year, ADL reached more than 8,200 students in 22 Brooklyn schools. That's why I'm so proud to announce that today, ADL will be making an additional investment of $250,000 for this program for the 2019-2020 school year. And that's just for starters. We have a goal of reaching as many as 40 schools in Brooklyn, with an emphasis on Borough Park, Crown Heights, and Williamsburg. Through our expanded No Place for Hate outreach, we have the potential to reach at least 10,000 more students in the borough's public schools, and also hopefully in its yeshivas and religious schools too. We will recruit from the community to find trainers to serve the communities that we seek to support. ADL sees this work as part of our core mission of fighting hate for good, and we're grateful that the New York City Council, as well as Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, have supported our efforts. So I'm also pleased, really honored, to be joined here today by so many faith and community leaders. I mean, look around. This is the mosaic that is Brooklyn, as well as elected officials, as well as other partners who are all lending their own hands to this work and agree on its importance. This alone won't stop hate. But if we can vaccinate our classrooms, if we can reach our kids, we have a chance at making progress on fighting prejudice once and for all. And together, as a community, as we collaborate, we demonstrate what it means to work toward cultivating a borough where everyone is welcome, where everyone can live and work, play, and ultimately pray without fear. That is the Brooklyn that the world knows and loves. That is the Brooklyn that we are so happy to help build with Borough President Adams, with the City Council, and with leaders all throughout our community. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and the commitment from ADL and moving this initiative forward. And again, I want to thank Evan on the local level, just has been amazing representing the organization. We want to bring on now our district attorney. Eric Gonzalez has pursued many of these cases, and we have been in constant communication around them. And I just want to thank you personally, Eric, for doing so. DA Gonzalez.
Good morning. I want to thank the Borough President, Eric Adams, and Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League, and also my friend, Evan Bernstein, for making a critical investment in our schools, in education, and against all forms of bigotry. The beauty of the ADL is that while their core mission is to protect the Jewish people and teach about anti-Semitism and prevent it, they also care deeply about all forms of bigotry, and much of their education speaks to anti-Black hate, anti-LGBTQ hate, and their work is so meaningful because it's about tolerance. And I'm grateful to the elected officials who are here today, our stakeholders in our community, and of course our clergy from Brooklyn's diverse communities for being here today, with standing with the Borough President and the ADL against all forms of hate, in particular these rash of despicable hate crimes and anti-Semitism against our Jewish community. Brooklyn is proud to have the second largest Jewish community in the world outside of Israel. That community is a stalwart, a part of Brooklyn. When many people fled Brooklyn in the 70s and 80s, what they considered the demise of the inner city, the Jewish community invested, built businesses, yeshivas, and shuls to make sure that the community would have a place to grow. And today, when everyone wants to live in Brooklyn, there's been pushback against the Jewish community in ways that have expressed themselves in anti-Semitism. Now, I can tell you from my experience as the district attorney, vigorously investigating and prosecuting these cases, we created a hate crimes bureau, a dedicated hate crimes bureau, less than a year ago to help the New York City Police Department further investigate and prosecute these cases effectively. And what we've seen is that there are three categories of offenders. There's those that have hate in their hearts and commit these despicable acts. There's many who have mental health issues and are arrested and then sent to mental health institutions, and alarmingly and most concerningly, a lot of these crimes, especially the most recent crimes, the ones you've seen on the news, have been committed by juveniles, people under 17 years of age, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's astounding, it's heartbreaking that our young people are full of this rage and this anti-Semitism. This is why I'm standing here today supporting the borough president and the ADL for this effort to get into our schools, because those cases are not even processed in our criminal courts. Those cases are sent to our family courts. The police department will make an arrest and have to then turn over the person to their parents. So we need, and we understand that making an arrest is not sufficient, that we have to get to the core of why this is happening. I think ignorance breeds hate, so therefore education is critical to battling bigotry and anti-Semitism, especially young people. It's a lot harder to select someone, to hate them if you know them, if you learned about their culture, if you understand where they come from. We've seen a number of SWAT sticker cases in Brooklyn, numbers that we have not seen years before. Some by children who don't even know what a SWAT sticker really means. When they've been arrested, we've held them accountable. And one of the ways that we've done that is by having some of these young people visit the Museum of Jewish Heritage. They live in memorial to the Holocaust. And then we had them dealing and having a tour with an actual Holocaust survivor and have conversations with other Holocaust survivors. These young people, upon learning the history of the Jewish people through the Holocaust and all that they've been through throughout history, have come back appalled and embarrassed by their behavior. Yet they didn't understand this before they etched a SWAT sticker on a park bench or at someone's property, whether it's by chalk or any other means. So I am very optimistic that with further education, further anti-bullying training, further tolerance training, we can make a difference in a lot of the lives of these young people. I've spoken to our school chancellor, I've spoken to the UFT, I'm fully behind getting into this classroom with a tolerance training. My office will help volunteer assistant district attorneys to do some of this training and teaching in the classrooms to bring people together. We will continue to bring our community together. And to any offender out there, make no mistake, if you select someone for an anti-Semitic hate crime or any other hate crime in Brooklyn, you will be vigorously prosecuted and held accountable and go to jail. I want to thank the ADL and the borough president for putting this money behind the curriculum so that we can get to more classrooms. I think that if we don't address this issue with our young people, we're going to continue to see this. If we can prevent these young people from committing these acts, we'll be safer. And my final message is to the Jewish community. I know that there's a lot of fear. There's fear of going outside, fear that you can't get from one place to another, that it's no longer safe in Brooklyn. I assure you that working with the NYPD, my office will do everything in its power to keep Brooklyn safe and to make sure these hate crimes are stamped out. Thank you.
And I believe it's important to hear from one of the members of the Crown Heights community, Rabbi Eli Cohen, Executive Director of Crown Heights Community Center.
Thank you, Borough President, and I really want to congratulate you, and you really have a great person in charge of this in the person of Pastor Gilman Rose. He's really a great guy, has done a great, really wonderful job. And I also want to congratulate the ADL on this work. Jonathan, you have the best of the best in Evan Bernstein as really not only creating activity and putting together an initiative like this, but also in educating the world about the dangers and the issue of anti-Semitism. And I know he's a great speaker and a great traveler. and really, really wonderful work that's being done. And I know that this project is going to be successful because I have my own experience in this area. Jeffrey Davis, a district leader in Crown Heights and a close friend, and I went into a number of public schools last year and spoke to the children. We went to elementary schools, we went to junior highs, and we went to high schools. And more recently, we sat down on the floor and read with preschoolers and read Jeffrey's new book about his interaction with the Rebbe and how he learned from the Rebbe about love yourself and love your fellow. And we saw a tremendous level of interest on the part of the young people, that they were responsive, they responded intelligently, they had wonderful questions, and we began to understand that when you, first of all, we role modeled a member of the African American community and a member of the Jewish community arm in arm working together, and that was, I think, an important message. But also, we saw that when you break down the stereotypes and when you eliminate some of the false narrative and when you explain some of the differences in dress and culture, in custom, that this helps a lot in bringing people together. And it was a very, very positive experience. And I'm sure that this educational experience that's being announced today will go further in that way. And there is no place for hate. And I think that's a great message and one that will be well received. And I also want to say that the response that we've had from our elected officials, both we have Matthew Eugene, our council member here, and the other council members that represent Central Brooklyn, Laurie Cumbo and others, and leaders all the way up to the Attorney General of the state of New York, that whenever there has been an incident, the willingness of our elected officials to come out and make the statement that this is not who we are and not something that we can tolerate, this is appreciated. And the same is true of our clergy leaders from all across the different faiths that are represented in Brooklyn, that everyone has shown the willingness to come out and make the statement that hate is not who we're about. And last but not least, I want to say that the response from the district attorney and law enforcement and from the New York Police Department to take these cases seriously, to prosecute them appropriately, to deal with them at the root, and prevention also has been phenomenal. So it's a great response at all levels. The community is together, and I think that we will reach and change the hearts of our young people through this initiative. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge some of the electeds that are here, and if you want to speak with them after, many of them represent areas of Jewish population. Assembly Member Joe Lintor, Councilman Matthew Eugene, Senator Brian Kavanaugh, Councilman Brad Lander, and one of the activists in the Crown Heights area, Devorah Haberstein. And I just want to acknowledge their presence here as well. And I believe that it is so important that we build off of what the district attorney stated, that when you have people using symbols of hate without knowing the meaning of the symbols they are using, then it is clearly the actions of these young people in particular is rooted in the symptom and not the underlying cause of their behavior. They are in family and community structures that is really perpetuating some of this hate that we see. Young people don't come from their mother's womb hating Jews, hating gays, hating blacks, hating Muslims. They are learning it somewhere. And the only way we can counterbalance the education of hate that is played out on our streets is to have institutionalized reversing that hate inside our educational system. So the money we're putting in this program to educate from kindergartens to 12th graders, this seed is going to remove the seed of hate, the seed of violence. And so when you look at the ADL's book that they put out, The Good Fight, you flip through the pages and you see the uniformity of all groups experiencing some level of hate. If we ignore what is happening to Jewish residents in this city, it's only a matter of time before those rocks, those stones, those writings, those terms of hate is going to spill over to the Christians, it's going to spill over to the Muslims, it's going to spill over to the Sikhs, it's going to spill over to those who are from the LGBTQ community. We can't tolerate it anywhere. And the voices that should be speaking the loudest about anti-Semitism are those who are not Jewish. Because if we are silent, then we are placing our heads in the sand, and then it's only a matter of time before our communities are going to impact this same form of hate. Hate is hate. That is what we're attempting to stop. And that is why this initiative is important. Today is only the start of our extremely well thought out plan of addressing the issues of hate in this city. What seems to be coming from Washington, D.C. is spilling over throughout all of our states and all of our cities. New York City in general and Brooklyn in particular, we're stating is stopping here.